This week, we welcome Lewie Dunsworth, CEO at Newspire, to discuss how CISOs can best prioritize security with a decreased budget. In the Leadership and Communications section, 5 signs a virtual CISO makes sense for your organization, how to negotiate virtually, why securing endpoints is the future of cybersecurity, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. With over half of enterprise security budgets going towards detection and response in 2020, the challenge is investing in solutions that can migrate and scale with your business. ExtraHop helps security teams spot threats up to 95% faster and respond 60% more efficiently in hybrid and multi-cloud environments with cloud-native network detection and response. Kick the tires in the full product demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 177, recorded June 15th, 2020. I am your host, Matt Alderman, still here in Colorado. I still haven't made it back to studio. Paul is off today, but joining me remotely on the lines is Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Matt, how you doing? Good to be here.
I see you're at home. Yeah.
Home office. Got to get back to the studio here in a couple of weeks when you guys get back from the conference, that's for sure.
I know. I'm trying to get in the week of the 29th. We'll see if we can get everybody together in studio for the next show.
Reunion, baby. Reunion.
Yeah. I keep telling everybody I need to get in and restock my cigars. I'm running low. Join us at InfoSec World 2020, June 22nd to 24th. Yes, it's next week, now a fully virtual event. Security Weekly listeners save 15% off the InfoSec World Conference, main conference or World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2020. Click the register button with our discount code. Our Container Security Summit is going to be live streamed on Monday, the 22nd, and I will be online most of the week with a couple folks from Security Weekly. We'll be monitoring our virtual booth, answering questions and any other interactions people want to have with us. Also, we are looking for high-quality guest suggestions for all of our podcasts to fill our Q3 recording schedule. Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests, submitting the form. We review them monthly. We haven't done it yet this month because Paul and I keep skipping our Friday meetings, so we'll try to get that taken care of here soon. As CEO, Lewie Dunsworth works closely with the leadership team, developing growth strategies and ensuring the company consistently delivers on its mission and strategic goals. With more than 20 years of information security experience, Lewie is an expert in navigating enterprise cultures while focusing on helping organizations prioritize risk and effectively managing resources. Lewie, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Pleasure to be here today. I really appreciate you guys inviting me.
Yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit. You have an interesting purview, and we wanted to kind of tap in a little bit to look at a couple things. One is, we know budgets are getting tight. We see the articles. We've covered a lot of them on this show, so we know there's some budget cuts coming. So one, as a CISO, how do I kind of prioritize where do I spend money? But number two, what's the shift we're seeing? Where are some of the winners and losers from a security perspective as some of these shifts in workforce and other things happen? So I want to dig in first by talking kind of at a high level, where do you prioritize if you're a CISO right now with a smaller budget than you had 4 months ago?
It's interesting. A lot of the strategies that you have from a cybersecurity standpoint really shouldn't change a whole lot. You still want to understand who the threat actors are that want to attack your environment, the types of tactics they're going to use to do it, what they want to steal from you, or if they want to disrupt your business, whatever they want to do from an attack scenario. A lot of that doesn't change. What it does is actually force you to really get good operationally. And what I mean by that is, if you can no longer invest in new technologies, if you can't invest in new resources that you may need to advance your program, you got to get really good at the fundamentals. And it really forces you to look at your organization and say, okay, how do we get really good with the, I got a lot of good people on my staff. How do I use them most effectively? How do I improve my processes? A lot of companies will go through the process, which has been a hot term the last few years, technology rationalization. How do you potentially reduce your technology stack to make sure that you can adequately not only use the technology you have in the right way, but use what you really need. So a lot of that shouldn't change, to be quite honest. But I think what it does, just like anything else, it kind of forces you to address it internally.
You kind of have to focus a little bit, right? And it's hard, I think, when we're dealing with some unknowns, right? My workforce is now distributed. I might have had my team sitting together in a security operations center, and maybe they're not sitting together in the SOC anymore. Nobody knows exactly when everybody's going to come back, whether everybody will come back. So how do you get that focus with kind of some of these unknowns, but then also this distributed kind of workforce?
It really comes down to communication. Whenever you have a disparate workforce, a lot of large consulting companies have dealt with it for years, where they have a large workforce disparate, kind of all over the country or all over the world. And they've learned that, communication and collaboration technologies, which I might add, whether it's Zoom, it's Teams, it's a lot of these Slack, or anything allows people to communicate or collaborate more effectively. You really need to double down on those technologies, really, understand how to use them, and really keep people connected, almost force the communication conversation, force the collaboration, whatever it may be. But you also got to be careful that you don't have burnout. Security practitioners by nature tend to really love what they do and very passionate about what they do. So you got to be careful in that regard too. But, as long as you really focus your team on the priorities and communicate effectively and set those expectations, you should be just fine.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, I've found it a place where now I can start fostering cross business unit collaborations, right? So having my security team and my network operations team collaborate on a project together, right? Because we're in a place now where, there aren't huge investments in net new technologies or services. So those projects are kind of slimming down, and those project timelines of projects that we've been finishing up are slimming down. So really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get my teams to collaborate more across the business unit. Have the IT services team and the security team collaborate more. Have the network operations team and the security team collaborate more. Hey, why not even partner with the finance department on a net new initiative that they may have?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And that was going to be my next question a little bit, Lewie, was how do you continue to build business relationships, right? Because, as Jason just said, he's cross-collaborating on some of his teams that he has, but you've also got to continue to build relationships, interact with the business. They're also now remote. Their staffs are remote. Obviously, these communication mechanisms are key, but what are some tips or tricks for the CISOs to continue to help really work on the business relationship side as well?
It's interesting. You got to get creative. Every organization, every culture is a little bit different. You just force the conversation. Schedule a happy hour with a peer in the organization or someone that you're trying to sell the benefits of an internal security initiative to. and keep it very informal or personal in some regards. Build those relationships. No different than what we do to try and keep teams together, build relationships outside of the company, whatever it may be. Do the same thing internally. And the thing about building a relationship internally in an enterprise in order to advance your agenda as a CISO is all about relationship building. It's all about communication. It's all about showing the benefits of what you're trying to do. Sometimes it's about bartering, whatever it may be. But in the end, it really comes down to building those relationships and just figure out how to do it. I mean, it's, you could schedule a morning happy hour over coffee or whatever it may be, but keep it informal, make it formal if it needs to be. But in the end, just make it intentional.
Yeah. I remember back in the, go ahead, Jason.
No, I was going to say, I agree. And many times I leverage those peer-to-peer relationships that I have within the organization to foster downstream relationships with our staff members, right? So for example, if I'm having a conversation with our executive vice president of services and he happens to talk about an initiative within his department, I say, hey, why don't you grab, your director of services and I'll grab my director of security operations and let's have them get together and start talking about that initiative and in different ways that we can help. So I really like to use that to develop relationships within our teams as well and start connecting dots and pieces of the puzzle throughout the organization. That way the relationships are at every level possible.
Yeah.
Now, we also, Lewie, talked a little bit about some of the trends we're seeing, right, that you're seeing. And this is where some of the prioritization comes into play. What are you seeing a shift towards over the past few months when it comes to the different types of technologies that are getting higher priority for implementation?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're seeing a lot of, at the end, I mean, unless you've just been living under a rock, everyone's talking about the infrastructure, the technology that's required to support a work from home workforce, I guess you could say. And everything from extending, quote unquote, the perimeter to the endpoint, to identity management, to the way that you leverage cloud-based platforms in order to do a variety of or fulfill a variety of capabilities for the business. I mean, you take some of the technologies that are out there that have been, I don't want to say exposed so much from a security perspective, but just like anything else, you want to do it in a secure manner, whatever it may be. But I think in the end, if you think about endpoint, traditionally, the endpoint is becoming kind of omnipresent. It's wherever, at any point, at any place, at any time, that thing is connected and operating in some form or fashion. Identity, who's doing what and why are they doing it? A lot of the cloud-based platforms are API secure and everything of that nature. So, and I think at a macro level, a lot of enterprises are being challenged in how to, digital transformation is being accelerated, meaning that everybody had these digital transformation initiatives and strategies and everything of that nature, but everything is being compressed to do more in a short amount of time, number one. Number two, which is also creating pressure on organizations because they are being stripped of some funding that they expected to have this year. So it's a bit of an interesting time.
Yeah, when I built it, what I'm seeing come to fruition is what I kind of predicted 5 years ago. And people have heard me say this. I'm a big believer that application, user, and data security become very important in a highly distributed world. And we were starting to see those trends over the past few years already happen, taking what was a centralized data center and start to decentralize that into the cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid environments. Now you take that momentum with what happened from basically 100% remote workforce, like overnight. And what I think you're going to see is acceleration around application, user, data security in a very different way. Endpoint obviously has its place because the home worker still is using that endpoint, but other endpoints could shift. away from some of that as people try to put more stuff into the cloud. So it's interesting, some of the areas you highlight, because I've been expecting this for a few years now.
Yeah. Yeah, and you are right. I think if you take a step back and you look at it, the end point is a means to an end, to get done what you need to. It's just a form factor, no different than the iPad or an iPhone or whatever it may be. And I think if you take a step back, you got to look at, that the user of the next generation user isn't tethered to an office, isn't tethered to a specific location, isn't tethered to a specific device, but it is going to be tied to a specific identity of some sort. It's going to be tied to what types of applications they have access to and what types of data they create and what they have access to. So to your point, you're spot on.
Where are some of the money shifting from now, right? So as I think about these other things becoming higher priority, are you seeing budgets shifted away from other traditional security vendors or solutions because of this acceleration and compression?
Well, I think what you're seeing is that the traditional means of protecting an enterprise, money being shifted away from those. So if you think about any sort of investment in on-premise types of technologies, whether it's hardware or software, is all shifting to the cloud. And you start thinking about, everything from storage to resources to whatever it may be. Everything's going to be shifting to the cloud. And what happens is that once you start to digitally transform, businesses start to realize that as you move to the cloud, you can architect and design and build security into those types of environments. So it just is natural for you to say, okay, how do I hedge the past or the present to the future, where I may pull back on some of the investments that I needed internally to build out my security program and redirect them to securing the new environments of the future. And I think what it does is it puts you in this weird spot where you're almost being forced as a security operations to support two different environments. I got this legacy environment over here I got to support. And then I have this uncharted territory or new environment, this, part of the digital transformation exercise that is really, it just puts a ton of pressure on a CISO to kind of navigate that space.
Yes, very interesting. So because we're live, Lewie, we can take questions live. So quick one from the audience, right? If a CISO is forced to operate their program with new restricted budget, what are the immediate things they can do to reduce costs while at the same time maturing their risk posture? How can partnering with an MSSP company help companies during this time with budget constraints? So obviously they know who Newspire is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think just by nature, being a managed security services provider, we see a lot of clients come to us that either don't have a 24/7 monitoring or security management part of their environment, or they may have it with an existing provider that they're trying to move to us. But in the end, the business case or the use case for them is still the same. They have resource constraints. They want 24/7 monitoring. They want subject matter expertise where they may not be able to find it, whatever it may be. But I think when you take a step back and you think about the two areas that I see most of when I was a CISO, my peers really work on, no different than myself, was the technology side of it. How do I reduce, going back to my earlier statement, reduce my technology spend? And that's really just a reconciliation of your technology stack. What do I need? What can I integrate together? Can I get 80% of what I need with 20% of the cost, as an example? And then on the people and process, or really the operational side, it really comes down to what do you want your core capabilities to be? As a business, where do you want to be really good as a security program? And what are the areas that you're not so concerned about that you could potentially outsource to a third party, or maybe leverage technology in some form or fashion? But it really comes down to make sure you reconcile your technology stack, collapse it down to exactly what you need to protect against the threats that are relevant to you. And then on the operational side, what you want to do is basically say, okay, what do I want to be really good at? And then double down there, and then I'll outsource the rest of that to other people.
Yeah, and we've seen that over the years with different service offerings, right? First, it was around kind of the monitoring aspects of your perimeter, maybe your IDS devices. We saw then evolution into other services like vulnerability management. Maybe I don't want to be scanning my network and doing all the reporting every day, but then I want to run my own SOC potentially, or I want to do my own threat hunting, but not everybody has the resources to do that either. So you can definitely see areas where, depending on where you want to focus, things you want to invest in, and then areas where somebody from a third party can help you.
Yeah.
Well, and I think if you look at it from the perspective of managed services as well, the one thing that we always tell our clients is don't kind of pigeonhole yourself into a box, if you will. Look at your business. I mean, a lot of, you may have resources in your environment, in your team, that can monitor your environment very effectively from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but you don't have the staff to do from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Don't be afraid to ask managed providers or managed security services providers to fill that gap for you. So think outside the box. Force your provider to really help solve your problems versus come to you with a cookie cutter solution.
Yeah. And to your point, right? So I'm on, my organization is on the opposite side. You're on the security managed services. My organization's on, traditional managed services for performance, right? So typically we'll tell our customers, we'll sit down and say, listen, we look at organizations in three fashions, right? You're either in a run, grow, or a transform mode. Leverage us for the run tasks, right? We can come in and make sure the day-to-day, keep the lights on tasks are taken care of, while you can take your existing folks and really focus on, growing and transforming your organization. So that's where that investment comes into play and really can add value, taking some of those day-to-day activities away from the team, so that way they can focus on the growth and the transformation of their company.
Spot on.
Yeah. Somebody to keeps the lights on, running the day job, and allowing you to actually go build the business relationship, right? I mean, if we think about where security leadership wants to be, working closely with the boards, working closely with the executive team, that means the CISO needs time to have those communications, spend that time, really understand where the business wants to go, and then how to use the CISO become a partner to the business to actually figure out how to make that work and enable that.
Yeah, no, that's it. And you can't be stuck in the day-to-day whirlwind and be able to achieve that, right? It's just not possible. And that's why you partner with organizations like this to get really some of that day-to-day run out of the way, so you can focus on the growth and transformation, like I said. And I mean, think about it this way, right? We were talking earlier about how do you maximize investment. One of the questions, how do you maximize investments? Well, think about it. If you can focus strategically on your organization, I have examples of security teams that worked with network operations teams and were part of an entire SD-WAN implementation that had, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of savings that they can in turn reinvest back into the organization, and with security investment as well. So it's that whole, the innovation, the consolidation of services, figure out where you can maximize and really work together across the organization to get savings back.
It's interesting. There's CISOs by nature are challenged with a couple different things. Number one, they really struggle with prioritization of risk. That the feeling or the knot you get in your gut because that there's risk in your organization, but you simply don't have the time, the money, the resources to fix everything at once. And you're really challenged with that. And on the flip side, going back to your point, you want to focus on the things that help you build and mature your program as a CISO, but you still have that constant pull back into the operations to say, hey, we got this risk over here, or, we need your assistance, Lewie, to help us solve this problem, whatever it may be. So it's a very, that's why I always say that the role of the CISO isn't for the faint of heart, because you have multiple unique pressures, different than any other role that I ever had in my career.
Yeah, it's challenging, right? And we've seen different types of CISOs. We've talked about different types of CISOs on the show, obviously. There are some that are heavily operational. There are some that are more kind of focused on the governance side of the equation and variations in between. When you're in an organization and you've got to try to wear those multiple hats, it puts a lot of pressure on you. If you can leverage a good partner to take over aspects of maybe the operations, that allows you to be a little more strategic, maybe move more to the governance side of the CISO role instead of trying to manage all the components.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's where a lot of it comes down to, what do you want to be really good at? If you know that in order to satisfy the needs of the business, if you're an organization that's really governed very hard from external regulatory parties or compliance requirements or whatever it may be, a lot of the governance is very important from that perspective. And you may be able to matrix out a lot of the requirements throughout the organization. But even, what's really interesting is if you think about the digital transformation and more companies going to the cloud, the skill sets required to do a lot of what's in the cloud, the idea of a developer on the security team. We've talked about security DevOps for years, but having a developer on the security team, if you go back 10 years ago, you wouldn't even thought about it. Today, being able to script security controls in cloud-based environments and everything of that nature is almost critical at this point. So I think what it does is, if you take a step back once again and say, okay, where do I, given the organization I'm in, do they expect me to be more technical? Do they expect me to be more of a leadership presence in front of clients or the board or other C-level, whatever it may be? Just make sure that you embrace that. Don't fight against it. Embrace it and figure out how to delegate or outsource the remaining stuff, if that makes sense.
Jason, you know what that's like, being in your briefing center often. You
100%. Yeah, I mean that's the key, right? I mean, when we sit down with executives from our clients, those are the conversations that we're having. We're talking about what their business goals are for the course of the next year or two, and then figuring how we can come in and help augment them. Right? I mean, we sit down with the executives and say, listen, here are all the different aspects of the run we can pull away from you. And then, hey, by the way, let's talk to you about strategic mapping, for your roadmap for the next year and a half on what you want to do strategically. That way you can go back to your leaders, you can go back to your board and say, here's my path, here's my roadmap, and here's, how we're gonna build this success out by leveraging a partner. And in many instances, we're filling a void anyway of either talent gap or their ability to retain employees. And, we're filling that gap anyway. And at the same time, opening up bandwidth for them to focus on the important business initiatives.
You're almost forcing them to focus through the conversation. Yeah.
Be strategic. We're forcing them to be strategic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Focus on app user data, moving to the cloud, and making sure your home endpoint is secure for your employees, and you'll be on a good path, right, Lewie?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's easier said than done, right? And I think, it's, the other thing that I would add that I see just from where I see the industry heading, visibility is going to be key. The more and more endpoints, whenever you have, just by human nature says that once someone is working outside a physical four walls, they tend to be a lot more, I guess you could say, forward thinking. People that are spinning up AWS instances in the cloud, deploying stuff into the cloud that people may not be aware of. Having visibility, controls, good change management, a lot of crazy stuff like that in a work from home workforce is very important as well.
Definitely. Jason, any additional questions for Lewie while we have him?
No, good to go. It's been great having you on, Lewie.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed it, guys.
Thank you, Lewie. Thank you for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
My
We'll
pleasure.
take a quick break, and then we'll cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.